There's a problem. What's wrong with this stream? You know, this is what the government has brought this storm. They're doing it, the people in power, to try and shut me down, to stop me giving you this review of this book. That's how important it is. They use their weather manufacturing technology to bring a storm and ruin my connection speed. And now only the select few will be able to decipher my words through this lagging connection. And only you will deserve to learn the wisdom that I have learned and will share with you now. Bronze Age Mindset. People are reading this book, Bronze Age Mindset, by an anonymous man called Bronze Age Pervert. Oh, I can tell you a bit about it. There's lots to go through, but to give you a short summary, I liked it. I liked it a lot. This is a good book, and I recommend it. It's kind of like this guy thinks a bit like me in some ways. He really likes the Indo-European worldview that dominated Europe in the Bronze Age, and he encourages people through his book and his philosophy to rekindle that. Now, I'll go, but let me first say this. Welcome to Survive the Jive. I'm Tom Rousel, and this, you see this? That means welcome to Survive the Jive. You can get t-shirts like this. If you scroll down, and you'll see there's my whole t-shirt store just under the stream. People are asking me, will the stream be left live here? Yeah, probably. It depends, as long as it's not really, really bad, in which case I might have to do it again, depending on the upload speed, I mean. But I avoided reading this book for a long time. It came out last year, and I didn't want to read it because I knew it was basically Nietzschean, and I thought I've already read Nietzsche, and I already lift weights. I'm already swole. I don't need a book to tell me to lift weights when I already do. I don't need to read Nietzsche again. I read pretty much most of his work anyway. And I thought it's just the same stuff retold with some 4chan humor, and I haven't got time to waste on that kind of stuff. But I was wrong. Actually, there's something to this book that there's a lot more to it than just that, and these are all elements that combine in it, but it's got more value than just that. And it had a really good marketing campaign, which the anonymous self-publisher actually did himself, involving like getting muscly men and pretty women on beaches to just hold the book up. And that was quite funny, I thought, and clever, but self-marketing, self-publishing, but it didn't entice me. But I'm quite resistant to marketing of any kind. But I actually started listening to the Bronze Age Pervert podcast called Caribbean Rhythms, and I thought he was so witty. He's got a very amusing sense of humour, and I thought, actually, yeah, I'll give this guy. I can imagine this guy's quite a good writer. He speaks with a thick Russian accent. I don't know if he really is Russian or if that's an act or whatever, but that is also somewhat used in the syntax of his writing. Like, he misses the articles on purpose. He just kind of has his way of expressing things in an incorrect English, but it actually works quite well. So actually, his writing style, if you take aside the Slavic and the Slavic sort of syntax and the missing articles and you take away the 4chan terminology that he drops in there sometimes, then he's quite a lot like someone like Henry Miller, or maybe or Louis Ferdinand Céline, maybe. He actually does reference this book by Céline in the in Bronze Age Mindset. This is a book I read when I was young, and I recommend. It's a good book for young men to read. And he says, Bronze Age Pervert, saying that because this is about a young man kind of like he goes as a Frenchman who goes to Africa, he goes to America, he goes like he's kind of just coasting through life but looking for space, trying to get out of like the restrictions. And it's a good book, actually. I should reread it. I haven't read it in about 10 years or so, but yeah, he kind of writes a bit like that, a bit more like Henry Miller, or like some, maybe even Ernest Hemingway or something. He got that kind of like sort of that style of like a, you know, well, God, not being very articulate to get today. So but yeah, like it's a what have I got? If Celine or Miller browse 4chan, then you can, it might be something like that. And I think he writes this way deliberately, and he's actually a very skilled writer. Like that's something that gives the book a bit of it makes it worth reading in itself, because too many sort of right-wing authors just try to communicate ideas in as succinct a way as possible, but actually artistry is so important in communications, and this guy is has quite a flourish with his style. It's actually a triumph, and it's one of the main reasons I recommend the book. In fact, a great literary achievement. It's almost like these kind of concepts were meant to be articulated in this way, in this sort of modernistic writing style. I assume Celine is an influence. I don't really know what his influence are in the terms of writing style, but he does his three main influences. He just makes them completely obvious because he name drops them so much. They are Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and the feminist author Camille Paglia, who I've not read, but I've heard good things about her. She's the old sort of feminism, apparently, which wasn't so awful. But there's unsighted influences. I'd say definitely it's a bit like Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right in its philosophy. It's communicating a philosophy which is pretty similar to Ragnar Redbeard, but it has a bit more. It's got some sort of metaphysical elements to it, but I'll go into the metaphysics in a bit, because that's something that I have some difficulties with. What are people talking about in the chat? Nonsense, utter nonsense, God. So there's also some, you could say, it's anti-modern, it's anti-modernistic, it's anti-civilizationary in a way. It promotes a form of Bronze Age sort of Indo-European piracy as a cultural ideal. And in some ways you could say it falls in line with some right-wing ecologists sort of, I won't name, the obvious Fed-related, writers that would get bad attention, but you can imagine that sort of ecology. And also there's many references to Greek heroes and Greek thinkers, which reveals the author's extensive knowledge of classical military history. He really focuses on the military campaigns of ancient Greek heroes like Lysander, and also like more recent European people like Columbus and Cortes, Walter Raleigh, and people like that, like heroic Europeans who have basically lived as pirates, but in one way or another, and expanded their territory, and it's all about, this all fits into his philosophy, which is about a concept he calls owned space. And that is the other thing that makes the book really special. It's the writing style and this concept of owned space. Thank you, CrossWiz, for your £2 donation. It's okay to be Cro-Magnon, he says. Now, so Schopenhauer's theory of the will as the fundamental element to life was developed by Nietzsche and then taken to logical extremes by Ragnar Redbeard. And Bronze Age Pervert tries to sacralize this worship of willpower in a novel metaphysical interpretation. He's somewhat Evolian in this attempt. There are some parallels to Evola and his appreciation for ancient pagan cultures as well, but he's not an Evolian. Although he's got far less reverence for pure metaphysics than any of the traditionalists. He certainly isn't a traditionalist. He's more in the Nietzschean school. Instead, the primacy of masculine action is the totality of meaning for him. And I thought that was somewhat deficient in scope, but I don't want to be unfair and just brush it aside. So I'll go into it in detail in a bit. But especially when he's looking at higher metaphysics, and he's got some contempt for Plato, which is consistently Nietzschean, and is again based on a rejection of some aspects of metaphysics that he dislikes, and that I think that although Evola also like celebrates this masculine ideal, I don't think Evola would share his rejection of certain metaphysical concepts like the soul, which he does believe in the soul, Bronze Age Pervert, but he says it's gay. His exact words. The soul is gay, but he was obviously joking a bit. But it's lots of humor in the book, which makes it fun to read as well. Someone was saying, fix your internet connection. I can't fix it. It's caused by a storm. I don't live in a city like you. I'm not an urbanite. I don't have access to cable internets that plug into my house. It comes through the air. And if there are clouds in the air, then I don't get internet. It's not boomer internet. I have the fastest internet in the village. The boomers all have slower internet than me. So this is the fastest technologically possible internet you can get for where I live. I live in the countryside. Maybe you don't understand. Some people, if you're a Zoomer and you've grown up in a city, you don't understand this. But try to understand. The weather is not within my control. I do have the likeness of a god in some aspects, but I am not capable of controlling the weather. Only the evil weather machine controlling psychopaths in charge of the world are capable of doing that, and they're the ones who sent this storm. So I'm only joking. I'm just invoking a conspiracy theory here to demonstrate what Bronze Age Pervert does. He does this quite a lot in the book too. Like sometimes he invokes fake conspiracy theories and fake chronologies of history, like saying like there's some theory like the medieval era never happened and stuff like that. He entertains it for a little bit, and theories about Atlantis and these lost civilizations and things, and they all serve a purpose within his book, which I don't think he really believes in them, but they are enticing to a certain type of people who enjoy online communications and stuff because they're sensationalist. And so he probably puts them in there to draw people in, and then to wrong foot them, because when you are introduced to a new concept that completely blows away your conceptions of everything in the world, then you're then left open. It exposes your mind to new concepts, and you become more receptive to them. So I think this is like a strategy to make people then. He does it at the beginning of the book. There's more like the conspiracy theory stuff, and then he just drops it all. And then he just moves into like actually expressing his philosophy as it is, without any of this irrelevant stuff. And I note that if you ever listen to his podcast, he often introduces the podcast. He begins it with a little conspiracy theory, like saying that there's mind control rays. It's like it's done with humor. Like he's saying, "Oh, they're trying to control my brain with mind radio waves and stuff like that." A bit like Alex Jones. It's done like in a comical and theatrical way, and I think it has a multiple purposes of one sort of being ironic and humorous for fun, and the other is just sort of to prepare people for. To open their minds to a new concept, so they put their guard down and not to be so critical and think everything's so serious. So it's a technique that encourages suggestibility in the impressionable and historically illiterate, and those who need the intrigue of fake mysteries in order to take an interest in history. But yeah, his philosophy and the stuff that he's communicating are in no way dependent on these conspiracy theories and alternative histories. And whether he believes them or not, they're not really that relevant to the overall book. They're just an added feature, and I think they're quite fun. And that's why that's why I was talking about the weather machines now. I have to make clear everything I say if I'm being ironic or not, because too many low IQ people just don't get it otherwise. All right. One of the key concepts in his book is about the Neolithic longhouse. So basically, like me, Bronze Age Pervert, he holds the Indo-European society of Indo-Europeans, which dominated Europe from the beginning of the Bronze Age and spread across and bringing bronze with it. The Bronze Age really is the Indo-European age because it's the age when the Indo-Europeans spread bronze across Europe. Although there are some Neolithic societies in the Eastern Mediterranean of Europe, the eastern part of Europe, southeastern Europe, like the Minoans. They had bronze before the Indo-Europeans came, but for the rest of Europe, it was the Indo-Europeans who brought it. So for the most part, it means the same thing: Bronze Age, Indo-European. So he holds this Indo-European society up as an ideal in contrast to more collectivist societies of Neolithic Europe and also of the Orient, places like China. He goes into detail about his criticisms of China. And he typifies the repressive and restrictive society which suffocates virile energy with an inferior and petty matriarchal authority as the society of the Longhouse. Now, this, I presume, refers specifically to Longhouse cultures of the Cucuteni Tripilia culture of the Balkans, because not all Neolithic people lived in longhouses, and a little bit confusingly, longhouses as a structure continued to be used well into the Bronze Age and beyond. Vikings lived in longhouses. But I believe the way he doesn't specify what he means, he just says the Neolithic longhouse as like a symbol of this matriarchal, collectivist, oppressive society that just wants to hold the youthful energy of the youthful spirit of young men who, like the warrior bands of young men who want to explore and conquer. They're held back by this longhouse society that he typifies. So because I assume he means the Cucuteni Tripilia culture of Balkans, because that was sort of like that had these Neolithic longhouses with about 30 people in each house, and then about a collection of them in a village. So quite unpleasant. And early anthropologists like Gimbutas contrasted the obviously patriarchal and masculine Indo-European cultures, or what she called the Kurgans, with the Cucuteni Tripilia and other Neolithic European cultures, but she typified as them as being matriarchal. Now, Bronze Age Pervert also sort of says they're matriarchal, but I don't think he doesn't actually go full Gimbutas. He does clarify this, but obviously, actually, I don't think they really were matriarchal, but it's true to say that they were they were less warlike than the Indo-European Bronze Age people, and perhaps more matriarchal. I don't know, but it's not fair to say they're matriarchal, really, because we don't know that. But so the Viking Age longhouse, someone asked CG what similarities were there. They look the same. They look the same in the sense that it's a long house. But the Viking longhouse, CG, is something very different, because the Viking longhouse is basically wouldn't work as a metaphor for what Bronze Age Pervert's trying to communicate by the notion of the longhouse, because the Viking longhouse is the house of the king. He's the Jarl, or it's the big shot, the big guy, the cool guy, the man who's a hero, who's been around the world, he's been raiding, he's a pirate. He's everything that Bronze Age Pervert celebrates, actually. He has the right to live in the big grand hall, and then he's got a big table in there, and in that table all the beautiful honeys, they serve mead to his best men, his thanes, his retinue, the best men in that community, in that culture. They are the only ones who get to sit at that table, and the better they are, the closer they get to sit to him, and the worse they are, the further down their bench they get. And if they're not even on the bench, then they're not even allowed to dine in there, and they can sleep in there when there's a feast. But all of those people have their own houses in other places. So the longhouse for the Vikings is more like a kind of a pub or a village hall or a town hall, and it's also the palace of the king. It's all those things in one thing. It's like a pub and a palace combined in that sense. And it's nothing at all like a Neolithic longhouse. It's not a communal society except for communal drinking, when they drink together and feast together and knit their poems and things. So he should have made that a little bit clearer, because longhouse. But I mean, I thought it was fine. So it was a good metaphor. Like the longhouse is the matriarchy in his worldview. So maybe I can find a decent quote actually where he clarifies that, because I might have misrepresented it, and I don't want to do that, because he does specify that it's not. There's a left-wing version of what the Neolithic was like, and there's a right-wing version, and he says they're both wrong. So so they're saying like women play a prominent role in such societies. or outright rule them. So there's a belief among some people that women ruled them. There was a long tradition of respect for women as oracle, which is only natural. For example, the Yoruba, that's West Africans, a water priestess, chimping out in ecstasies over the boa, receiving visions. This is not so different from the Pythia, which is in Greece. But where the Pythia had submitted to the solar and boyish manliness of Apollo, such a conquest of the power from under the earth never took place in Africa, nor in many other places. And so here, as elsewhere, there is a kind of matriarchy, but it works covertly so that both the left and the right are fooled on this point. In the end, then, the left is more correct. The worship of the titanic powers of the earth, of the Great Mother, is connected to a kind of matriarchy. But where they're wrong is in imagining that this leads to any kind of freedom, that it represents a kind of liberation from the strictures of modern civilization, the pain of specialization, the submission to moral authority, the modern alienation, and every other thing they like to blame. In fact, everything that you hate about modern life, and that makes it into an iron prison, and I agree it is a prison, represents a return of the endless sallow night of matriarchy. It is a return in every way. You must understand this literally. Nietzsche says that in modern Europe you see the reassertion of pre-Aryan modes of life, the return of socialism, of the longhouse, of feminism, and that this is happening also to us internally, where the higher instincts of the spirit are being overtaken physiologically by the retrograde and prehistoric. So you can see what he's saying more clearly now. I think it's a great point. Like in another part in the book, he says within us there is this battle between the Neolithic, swarthy manlet and the proud, blonde, strong, tall Bronze Age man. And each of us has both of these, and we have to make the Bronze Age pirate win. And that when Britain, for example, Britain's colonial era was an example of when the Bronze Age spirit was very strong in us and we were out there conquering as pirates again. And now we're reverting back into a Neolithic matriarchal form, which is an interesting concept. It's sort of a sort of, expansive view of history that categorizes everything into these neat sort of easy to typify sort of things, just like Marx has. And that's a nice, it's an interesting concept of history. What negative things does he say about the Chinese? Similar to the Neolithic, that they're collectivist and that they don't celebrate the masculine Indo-European kind of thing. That someone asked, non minor. Shall I move on to the next subject? So perhaps he should have. What was he saying here? Perhaps he should have focused on the difference between the Indo-European Bronze Age barrow and the Neolithic long barrow to make the point instead of the long house, because since the Bronze Age round barrows are all about celebrating one great man and perhaps some of his family member too, the Neolithic long barrow is an anonymous collectivist tomb containing the urns or bodies of countless generations, rather similar to practices you see in the East now. In Japan, for example, you get these you pay to have a little urn put on a shelf in this room full of shelves and everyone's got their own. It's not very, there's no individuality to it, and that's very Asian, isn't it? Like we see these ancient Bronze Age dudes, they had massive barrows, just them. And then the Neolithic long barrows like Kennet Longbarrow, etc., or Wayland Smithy, that's just like a bunch of people were in it and they haven't got any distinction from each other. So you can see the Bronze Age was a time when it became less egalitarian and there was more hierarchy. And at the top of the hierarchy was a bloke who was tough and strong and a pirate of some kind. So I've gone through the Viking stuff. The thing about me, sort of, Bronze Age village is mainly constructed of round houses, not long houses, so I guess they're more individualistic than the Neolithic thing. But when he talks about the Bronze Age ideal, I don't really think he's talking about Bronze Age, Nordic Bronze Age or British Bronze Age. I think he really mostly means like the Greek Bronze Age, because he seems really keen on the Greeks. That's an interesting stuff to talk about. But he'll probably say my correcting him on the Longhouse thing was gay, and that's a good way of dismissing stuff. He might be right to point out that's a bit irrelevant, since the actual point he makes still stands. Like my tendency is to criticize these little things, but overall the book has a good philosophy to it, even though there's some bits I disagree with, but I have to say that I disagree with them because that's just my nature. So the crisis of the heroic impulse in the modern age, as he sees it, is the crisis of owned space. And if I communicate one thing about what this book's about, people want to know what it's about. It's about his idea of owned space. I'll try and go into it, and he basically uses history as a way, and some philosophy as a way to communicate this idea. So modernity, as the Bronze Age Pervert sees it, is the re-emergence of the Neolithic matriarchal society in which men are emasculated and even seek to become women. That transgenderism, due to a conscious but misguided reaction against a fake form of limited masculinity confined within space that they can't claim for themselves. So in their youth, they recognise that there's a kind of falseness of masculinity within confined space. They reject that limited masculinity that won't claim space, but then in the process they accidentally become part of the problem that they were originally rejecting in their youth, as Bronze Age Pervert sees it, by rejecting their own masculinity altogether and attempting to become a simulacrum of a woman. So actually I find this in general idea of own space as a problem, as a source of malaise of the West and the world, like especially for young men, this feeling of they're needing own space. I think that's actually a genius diagnosis of modern malaise, and it definitely is what causes certain derangements and drug addictions among young men. And what they need to transcend this is a sense of own space, and I think that's like why a lot of young men like to travel. They want to break out. It's the same reason that young men want to take drugs. They want to break out of this, because the natural in Indo-European society, they had this notion of the Manabund. If you read a great book by Chris Kershaw called The Indo-European Odin, the One-Eyed God and the Indo-European Manabund, she outlines this in all different Indo-European societies, and it's really interesting because basically the need to get rid of or to deal with the problem of young men who are boisterous and this youth energy was manifested itself in Bronze Age cultures as the Menabund, groups of young men forming strong friendships and going out into the world as pirates and just taking what the hell they wanted, coming back and then living as the rulers of that society because they've proven themselves as pirates. And that impulse still exists in young men now, and it needs to be subdued. It needs to be broken. Every young man now is broken. They break us in with the educational systems, with indoctrinations on television, all these kind of things to break our spirit, to make us controllable, so that we become through phytoestrogens, drink lots of hoppy beer, watch lots of programs with feminized men as your role models, read philosophy and political ideas that tell you how evil these ancestors that you should be worshipping as heroes, they're going to tell you how evil they are. All these things combine to break the spirit of the youth, and the youth will therefore never become a problem that they naturally would be for this sort of longhouse society otherwise. So this sense of own space is basically when the young men realise that they live in a space that is entirely owned, that they cannot claim any of it, and that there's no avenue for piracy. They sort of reject it in one way or another, and that might mean that they go completely doolally, take drugs, or go in some weird sexual fetish, or it might mean that they go travelling a lot and trying to find the freedom that the third world offers, which is a freedom that Bronze Age Pervert says he has pursued, because I know as someone who's travelled a lot, even if you're in a really oppressive communist society in the third world, you're more free than you are here because of the incompetence of the legal system there. There's just they don't have this super technology for monitoring everyone and controlling what we're doing and keeping an eye on us and intimidating us all the time. In third world countries where they'd like to have that sort of tech, they don't actually have it. They don't have anywhere near that kind of social cohesion. Generally most people don't really obey the government in third world countries. So everyone's kind of free in a way that we can't be in the West. And that's something very appealing to the male spirit, the young masculine youth energy. So they'll pursue that, just as the Menabund of Indo-European times did. And this is some part of his like idea of a tropical awakening. He thinks that this these spaces in tropical parts of the world will be the places which will nurture this Bronze Age mindset again among men who spend time in them. So matter is really primary for his view of own space. So in that sense, it's a bit materialistic. It's essentially materialistic, but it has some non-material elements. I should go into them in a bit. But it's still heroic. It's a heroic worldview. It sees life as a conquest of matter, not entirely dissimilar to the Marxist notions of material narratives of history. Everything is a battle for resources in Bronze Age Pervert's view, same as in Marx's view. And I don't deny that's an essential character of life. Of course it is. Organisms compete for resources. Of course, that's what biology is. That's what evolution is. I don't deny that. And I like that Bronze Age Pervert goes a little further than Nietzsche by actually attributing a sacral quality to this striving for dominance over matter. Like he tries to imbue it with a religious element, which is interesting. He also succinctly typifies the essential masculine spirit of the Indo-Europeans and of all real men as one which seeks to dominate the material world around them, and not towards an ultimate end of total control of power. Not like in the end, with the end goal of controlling everything, but really that the actual process of owning space, of competing for space, is a goal in itself. That striving for dominance is the game of life which one competes in without regard for personal safety or consequences, and this is where heroes are born, through this pursuit. And this does seem to be quite a fair assessment of the ancient heroic personality type. And it also reminds me a bit of Maurice Samuel, a Jewish author who wrote a book called You Gentiles, where he tries to typify the difference between Jews like him and Gentiles, and he says that you Europeans have a kind of carefree joie de vivre, and that views you see all life as kind of sport and game and play, and this is in Maurice Samuel's view in contrast to the grave and morbid seriousness of the Jewish view of history. So I don't know if Bronze Age Pervert read Samuel Maurice, but that's quite Maurice Samuel. Sorry, that's interesting anyway. Travel, to go more into this tropics as frontier thing, which is interesting. I don't like to recommend people travel because I hate people who recommend other people travel. Like they used to do that when I was a kid. Like people used to say that to me, like, "Oh, you need to see the world." Like when they found my views too reactionary or something, they say you haven't traveled enough. So I deliberately rejected travel for that reason, because I didn't want to be part of this bourgeois tendency to just get on a plane and then find oneself allegedly. But actually I found travel has been an enlightening and positive experience in my life, and mostly for that feeling of freedom and open space that it's afforded, the feeling of being outside of the control of the forces that generally control us in the West. So society has suppressed young man's natural instincts to conquer, as I said. So embracing this Bronze Age mindset allows us to reassert our natural place in the world as pirates and barbarians as we were in the past. And that is, I find that's really interesting idea. I don't know how much he's humorous about it, like his talking about on his, not in the book so much, but on Twitter, like about impregnating the natives of various countries and stuff like that, and forming dynasties in tropical islands and whatnot. A lot of it's hyperbole, and a lot of it's just just deliberately trolling, and a lot of meme humor in it. But that's also good as well. Like it makes it quite fun to read. I'll go on to the big problems the issues I had with the book in terms of religion, and like his typification of paganism and in it, and Christianity in a second. First, I'll just go into the comments and see what you guys have been saying, because I can't talk and read at the same time. I'm not a multitasker. So, super chats. We got any? Did I miss any? Reminder that travel lust is degenerate and typical of basic women, not of proper men, says Hugo Alexandra. This is just a really stupid thing to say, because actually I've seen these kind of women when I've travelled, right? And I know there are certain degenerates there, and there are certain types of women who do this stuff, but you'll see that they don't really travel. They don't go anywhere. There's a kind of like, they're like ants, you know, like ants always follow the pheromone trail, and they go around in these trails where all the different like basic white people go on the same little trails. They don't explore. But if you're going, well, like I travel and just go somewhere where no one goes and just walk off into the jungle with a machete and try and survive with just a machete and an Indian to help you or you just, when I was in India, I just just walk off into the jungle and see what I see, and just that's exploration, that's adventure. You can have adventures like that, and you will get hurt. I've been sick, I've been hospitalized many times from doing stuff like that, and that's what I want. I want to be challenged. I want to have these kind of stories. I can't go into them now because it's a book review. It's not a talk about my life. But this kind of comment from Alexandra is just it's just very small-minded. It's someone who thinks he can understand something that he hasn't experienced from the outside. If you don't have to travel. I don't say everyone should travel, but I think you should recognize the opportunity for heroism and celebrate heroism wherever it exists in the world. And heroes always are never the people who just stick in their village, are they? They're the people who go on adventures. All right. Some other things. Women should... Oh, okay. People, opinions. Simply travelling full of comfort on a plane, experiencing tourist attractions is nothing compared with travelling of yore. Well, in the old days, Hugo, they had boats, whatever, and they could say, oh well, it was nothing like traveling on a steamboat is nothing like traveling on a sailboat, and then sailing Vikings could say, oh, in the old days we had to row the whole way, we didn't have sail technology. It's all about what you do when you get there. I guess, I mean, bear in mind, like if you fly to a third world country, you get a nice comfy plane. It's not that comfy anyway. It's pretty uncomfortable, in fact, to spend 12 hours on a flight. Then what? Then you've got the only way of travelling is on a third world dirt track in a bus with chickens and like stuff all around you, and you've got to, every time you got like food poisoning, you've got to puke out the side of the. I've had bus journeys at like 15 hours long where I'm puking the whole way. I can't eat anything. I'm dehydrating. There's like animals and stuff around on the bus. You think that like that's really glamorous? No, that's not where. I mean, it's not fun. It's not like a fun experience. Like, it's a challenge. And it's about finding open spaces, which is what read Bronze Age Mindset's book, because it's got it tries to say what I'm attempting to articulate, but better than I've said it. Oh God, there's some really dumb comments here. Okay, I'm not going to go into these anymore. I'm bored of that. So now I'm going to go back into the book. What can I say? Now, he starts the book going into religion. So it's quite... He obviously wants to get into that quite early. He does say, like... I basically think he's an animist. There's a few lines that make it clear he is. He says there is an intelligence inside things. That's animism, basically. And before anything to do with the brain or the nervous system. He thinks that this kind of innate intelligence precedes the intelligence of the biological intelligence of the brain. That's sort of like elsewhere he says similar things about that. He also said, even as a small boy, I felt every object was inhabited by an uncanny shadow or spirit. This animism is the natural religion of man and shows itself even to a small child left alone to play. So I think that he has an animist. So he's not a materialist entirely, but he's trying to take like heroic materialism and like Nietzschean ideas of the will as being the central and most important thing in existence and make a religion out of that, which doesn't actually depend on any kind of theological belief, although he does seem to have a belief in the gods, but not in any conventional way. So yeah, someday he says we may discover the material cause or manifestation for this the correspondence of this stuff. So he's saying like, okay, even if it's animism, he's saying he doesn't rule out a scientific explanation for this spirit. It could be a mechanistic function. So he does get yeah, when he says about the soul, like he says he basically thinks that the reincarnation beliefs of the early primitive societies are better. Like, and most pagans did have some view of reincarnation, and he prefers them to the monotheistic notions of the soul. And he says it you do have a soul of sorts apart from your body, but it isn't you. It's a shade. It's completely homosexual. Obviously, I disagree with this, but yeah. What else it says? I'm almost sure that gods exists, and in any case, the argument against the one god isn't the same as against the other gods. So he has some interesting arguments against monotheism. Later in the book, he does like celebrate some heroic Christians in the colonial era and some other heroic Christians who fought against enemies of Europe, for example. But he is critical of the notions of monotheism, as I am, and less critical of polytheism. He does seem to think the gods exist, but he says he's not certain of it. And obviously, the religious view, the religion he's promoting in the Bronze Age mindset, is not the exact. It's not any of the religions of Indo-Europeans in the Bronze Age. It's just a sort of recognition the gods could exist, but we have to worship willpower, which is more like some Ragnar Redbeard kind of thing. So he says monotheism overreached, whereas the polytheistic beliefs are easier to swallow. All pagans knew the world was eternal, and that its present condition was a result of cycles of birth, rebirth, regeneration, copulation. The Japanese even have myths about gods shitting on fields to make them fertile. How proper! It makes many other things about Japanese culture easier to understand. So that's quite funny. But then he goes on to... I agree with a lot of that. Like, you know, I'm a polytheist. I believe in the gods, and I believe in like a cyclical version of all nature. And I do believe that his idea that there's an innate will to life within life, that's true as well. But to make that the highest thing in existence, that's where I start to disagree. So he says monotheism, even of the intellectual or deist variety, especially that variety, makes all kinds of claims too about the lawfulness of matter or of nature, about intelligent design and the like. So he's against this idea of like a lawful, like ideas that like Plato and Christians have about there being a logos, about there being a logic to the universe, I guess. So I don't like that, but the true gods have a kind of power, but not the kind that many imagine. Why should they care for mankind? They are rare and precious, and it is for man to find, acknowledge, and honor them. This, at least, was the ancient view. I agree there. Yeah, that is more like what we see in the Viking sagas and in the Iliad. That is basically what the kind of general faith that seems to exist. Gods could not control nature or fate, but could reveal its workings at key times. If a god showed himself today to you in a dream, would you have the inner energy and power to honour him and do his bidding in the world? Or would you, neutered by the modern pervasive hive mind of the slave, dismiss it and yourself as unreal or unworthy, when it is the modern bugman and his blabbering that lacks reality? So he's challenging there, a bit like Nietzsche's challenge of the eternal return. I find that stimulating and interesting. But where do I find more to disagree with? Here's something when he starts to say about if you want to understand the true power of ion, of the eternal youthful energy that is the universe, you must study what remains from Heraclitus when he uses this word, and how he connects it to the idea of fire that is the essence of all things and all action. And he is very right when he says the best desire one thing above all, ever flowing eternal fame among mortals, but the many glut themselves like cattle. This is what I believe in. So here he's very clear about that, what he believes in. And I think that is, definitely a major aspect of ancient Greek and ancient Old Norse belief, like the belief in, cattle die, or kinsmen die, one thing never dies, the fame of a great man. Vikings say it's quite clear. And I did talk about this in my video on the tripartite Indo-European soul. It is a primary aspect of the notion of Indo-European religion. Kleros. In Greek, the word is kleros, and in Indo-European, it's kleros as well. It comes from a Proto-Indo-European word. The Slavic cognate is slava, but it means, to be honored and famed. Honor and fame. It's the high. He tries to make this the very highest goal, though, and I don't believe it was the highest goal in the European religion, because that ignores the priestly roles. Because the priests have always had a function in Indo-European religions, and in most Indo-European times, the priest has been higher than warriors, higher socially than the warriors. So we can't say then that the warrior is the highest ideal. It just can't. It doesn't match up, in my opinion, with the reality of Indo-European culture and what we know about the mythology and stuff. I just don't buy that. Yes, Kleros is high. Yes, it is holy and good, but it's not. It's unsatisfactory in itself as an entire worldview, because you can't. Striving is good, but in itself, ultimately, there needs to be more to existence of that. And he's trying to justify it with a kind of, based on a mixture of intuitive animism mixed with a recognition of the realities of evolutionary science, and to say that this is scientifically evident in nature, that everything is part of this striving onward, and therefore we're embodying it perfectly in the form of the militant pirate youth of the Bronze Age mindset. That's the ultimate, but I don't think it's the ultimate. I just think it's a high and honourable idea. I think that there is a higher one, which is it's contemplative and more what he would call gay. I think, but yeah. So maybe I can find some more cool quotes. Yeah, he talks about Indo-European stuff here. The idea, he's talking about this basic concept of aner, which is basically like kleros or something like it. The idea was shared also by other Aryan cultures. The Roman vir, which is where we get the word viral, or something similar. The Sanskrit and Avestan nar, the Welsh ner, the Proto-Indo-European ner, all ultimately refer to a kind of vital life force capable of superhuman strength. There is other word related, having to do with manly youth. Ayu. Ayu refers to the youthful life force that renews itself in each generation, that moves from life to life without end, forever persisting. It is behind all the Indo-European words for youth and youthful strength and power. So he does have you can see his ideal. He even says, he thinks the gods probably exist, and if they do exist, they would take the form of a young, strong man, youthful men, just as they appeared to the Greeks. That's what he's in his words. So that's why he likes on his Twitter to post the physiques of young bodybuilders and strong men with their tops off, and that apparently it's not being gay. It's to celebrate this ideal. Man of power spent his time in the hunt, at the gymnasium, in the study of military history and strategy, in every way making himself ready for war, referring there to ancient Greece. Someone asked, what gods does he worship? I don't know. If he's a Slav, you would imagine Slavic, but I suspect ancient Greek ones, really, because he loves ancient Greece more than anything else. He doesn't really mention ancient Slavs so much. In the podcast, he did talk about something like in the Balkans, like how they have some enduring pagan beliefs there. So he's a pagan, but you can tell from his interview with my friend the Golden One that he kind of rejects most aspects of modern paganism. He's not a practicing pagan in any sense that I don't imagine he's ever participated in a proper ritual to the gods. But he probably believes in them vaguely, and has heavily influenced by the behavior and action of ancient pagans. Let me answer some more questions. If anyone just constantly counter signals over and over, then I'll just block you. I don't care about anything else. I'll just block you if you're annoying. I've lived in a tent in England most of my adult life. 4.5 of it was feeding the very dog in my profile pic, Nico. I poached, trapped and hunted. I've used a Dutch arrow a fair bit. Yeah, I mean, England is one of the most densely populated parts of the world. I camped all around England. I tell you that England is not a wild... There's no wild country in England. There is literally no wild land in England. I mean, there are forests, but those are managed forests. They're planted trees, they're timber farms. There is nothing. Every field is man-made. There is nothing in the English landscape, or even in most of Europe, in fact, that is just totally wild. And some people, if that's enough for you to feel like that's an adventure, then fine, do it. I mean, I like to go hiking in the moors here. And some people in the Victorian times, people used to say the moors were prehistoric landscape, like they'd always been like that. Now we know they're not. They were made like that in the Bronze Age by Bronze Age people cutting down all the trees and creating them. So the Bronze Age mindset created the world that you live in. That, but there are unconquered spaces. Like if you have a lust for unconquered space, then you have it. I guess not everyone has it. Some people getting angry about Nordicism. That is a thing he talks about in the book, Nordicism as well, about the phenotypes of the ancient Greeks, that they were mostly, that they were not the same as modern Greeks. And he did a podcast on it as well, so you can just, I won't go into that because he's already done it in the book, and it's not very, like, just listen to the podcast if that's something that interests you or you want to hear him talk about it. Yeah, here's a quote that I thought kind of summarizes his book a bit, and it's him using a quote as well. If you want to see what the spirit of the Bronze Age is, you look to ancient drinking song at the mess halls of Crete and Sparta. This is my wealth, my spear and my shield. With this I trample sweet wine from the vine. With this I am called master of serfs. Those who do not dare to have spear and sword and fine leather shield to protect skin, all cower at my knee and submit, calling me master and great king. Come on. If you don't think that's cool, then you must be a whifter. So I just say, Dartmoor is not wild. No, none of the moors are wild. And then someone responds, not even Dartmoor is wild. That's what I said. That's what I'm saying. That's literally what I said. Trying to just correct me by repeating. So I'm not answering questions that aren't about the book. You know, when I do a stream on the subject, I just talk about the subject. Don't bother talking to me about anything else. Maybe I'll answer a different question if it's a super chat, but thank you for the £10 donation, clown face. Repeat after me. That's very kind. I don't see any comment. Northern Canada is largely emptied and untouched if you want to disappear into genuine wild. That's a good place to do it. I bet that it is pretty. I bet that's why that people went there. Partly that's why all these trappers went there, because they were, trappers from France and Britain who felt like they needed more space, and they got more than enough space up there in the far north. But I quite like the tropics. There's something also about the whole point. Another thing that he's talking about, freedom, is not just freedom in terms of like empty spaces, like wilderness, like the Amazon jungle or like the Arctic. Obviously you're free to do what you want in the Arctic where it's just snow and ice. But there's another kind of freedom, which is the freedom from the freedom that you get from incompetent governments that have no way of a corrupt society gives you freedom, because if I get caught breaking the law in the third world, I can bribe a policeman and then I'll be on my way. But if I get caught breaking the law in this country, that's it. There's no escape, and there's all these mechanisms to watch you all the time. So you can that feeling of being unrestricted is very. I guess some people just don't desire it, but I've had that desire for it, and I think that you see it in the British proletariat as well when they travel, like football hooligans and stuff. when British people go, as soon as they're out of their country, they immediately misbehave. They immediately drink too much and start punching people and urinating in the streets and things like that they don't do as much back home. And I think that's because they feel like they're in unowned space, but they're not. They don't realise that Marbella or wherever this, it's not really. They're still in own space. They just haven't realised it, and they can't get away with it. I've got a question now. CG, does Bronze Age mindset give any advice on how to accommodate for living in the modern world and seeking an older lifestyle like lifting, training? Yes, it does. It doesn't give practical advice. It doesn't tell you it doesn't have like like a lifting regime of how much to lift and when, but it just generally does like I do. It advises everyone to exercise, and it's more of a philosophical argument for the justification, the importance of physical excellence, the importance of physical strength as an aesthetic, not just as practical means, but also in general. So yeah, it does, and I think it's also it's a kind of book that gives you that good motivation for the gym. I was deadlifting today, before when I did a little brief overview of the book in the morning, then I went to the gym. I had to remind myself of some things of the book before doing the stream this afternoon. So yeah, someone says the only wild places left in Britain are council estates. I grew up in one. Well, I can say that there's actually probably some truth in that. Like there is maybe more in some ways, like hiking up to Ben Nevis. And that's a certain there's something empowering about that, but there's probably something equally empowering about being part of some criminal underworld in a council estate as well. Because if you become a dominant figure in in some crime syndicate like mafia or something, that would be like that. I'm not advocating for mafia or criminality of any kind. Let me make that clear. But I'm just talking about there are more than one form of heroism, and there's different kinds of spaces to conquer. Like Evola says that the differentiated man should be he is just as much as home, feels at home just as much in the jungle as he does in a huge overpopulated filthy city. He can be in any location and feel that he is in charge and in power, because he isn't ruled by his surroundings. Rather, he bends the world around him to his will, to his he's got an inner pillar he emanates such a confident power that it doesn't really matter whether he finds himself trying to cross the Saharan desert, stranded at sea, or in the projects in some ghastly American city or something. He'll do it. He'll be all right, and that is basically, I guess, something maybe similar to what Bronze Age Pervert would say. Maybe not. Maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, but that's Evola's view. But would you ever do a video that's not a live stream, that is just a book review? Well, I've done that several times. So I've already done 2 book review things that aren't live stream. Just have a look through my old videos before you ask me to make new ones. People always say, can you make a video about this? Less clicks to just look at what videos I've already made than it is to ask me if I've made it. Oh God, good thing that the filter is really good now on YouTube to just get rid of the idiot people. So looks like I've come to my mandatory 1 hour stream now. I think I'll be wrapping things up, but I've enjoyed this, and I hope that it's useful for you guys. It's a good book, as I said. I'm not being paid to do this review. I haven't been given any incentive. I wasn't given this free. Sometimes people give me books for free to review, and I have a big pile of them that I wanted to do, but I will review them. But this one wasn't given to me free, so I'm under no obligation to be nice about the contents of this book at all. I don't know the author, so he's, I'm just saying it's a good book because it's well written, and the concept of own space is, to me, novel. I wasn't aware of this philosophical idea, and he marries this sort of an interesting kind of combination of Nietzscheanism and animism and the worship of Kleos as the highest ideal of man. It's quite cool. Anyway, he's a fellow in the Europeanist in that sense anyway, so all hail the Bronze Age. See you later, guys.